It's like a dream for me to have this celebration right here. My favorite restaurant in Sacramento. And honestly, whenever we go to other cities, we always go, well, it's not as good as Magpie. I won't name the other cities where we say that. But a great gift, and I want to tell you, the biggest gift tonight for me is the presence of Carla Meyer. So I'm going to tell you, yes. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Carla, then I'm going to ask her to give the details because I keep getting it wrong. She's currently got a regular gig as the senior editor at UC Davis School of Law, and she has spent quite a bit of time as a reporter at the Sacramento Bee before, and at the San Francisco Chronicle, and most importantly, the Bakersfield Californian. Yeah. And she also is a freelance reporter and movie reviewer for the Chronicle, the LA Times, the Wrap. She writes about food for Sacktown magazine. I'm going to ask you to jump in real fast and add what I messed up.
I think that you have it. I would just say that, yeah, I think you have it. I was at the Californian for a while. Mm-hmm. Yeah, my first job. Yeah.
And I will say about that you can imagine how I reacted on Facebook when it became clear not only that her first reporter gig was in Bakersfield, my hometown, but also that our fathers played football together.
Yes, actually, I'm actually from Shafter, which is like a farm town near Bakersfield, and my father's from Wasco, as is Shelley's dad, and they went to high school together.
So that was just an automatic. But mainly, those of you who know me really well, the main attraction is that in spite of all of her sophisticated intellectual work, she also has this huge Bakersfield chip on her shoulder, as do I. So sisters from the region.
Yes. So anyhow, I wanted to congratulate you on your book. It's fantastic. And I am, as someone who worked at the Chronicle for many years, lived in San Francisco for many years, had no idea about the peace riots. So I want to know how you came upon that as a topic for your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was finishing up with Poster Girl, my last book, and I'd like, what am I going to do? What's going to happen next? Will it be in the same universe? Will it be something else? And I have this great big fat history of San Francisco, which was written by Charles Fracchia, who was the founder and the director of the San Francisco History Museum. So I was looking through, I'm like, what kinds of things have I not heard about before that are of interest or sticky for me? So really, like, the very first chapter, maybe the first page in this book was about this peace riot thing. It was 2 paragraphs. And I'm like, holy cow, I have never heard of that before. And why does it only earn 2 paragraphs? So then I started, just out of curiosity, the rabbit hole thing, started doing the research and found that the most I could find was really from about 10 and then 15 years ago, contemporary reporters for the Chronicle, chiefly to me, Gary Camilla, had a column called Portals of the Past for the Chronicle. And so, like this is the 80th anniversary of the peace riots this week. On the 70th anniversary, Gary Camilla in the Chronicle had done some updating. Oh, maybe you didn't know this had happened. And where they did a lot of great work is finding photographs of that night, which I just violated copyright law because my husband's an IP lawyer, and I just ripped them out of the Chronicle and put them on my slideshow. Nobody sue me. So at any rate, it was mainly that I got started because I was fascinated and was shocked there was no information about it, and that absence of information was what got me going. Yeah.
Now, when you say that you found the photographs, was that through the Chronicle?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to talk to you about your history. Now, I know that you taught and that's what you did. Were you ever a journalist?
Never. I have no business writing these books. But what I am is I sort of feel like people write books about things that they are not all the time. So that's what I told myself. But also I am a fangirl for journalists. I'm a fangirl for reporters. I'm a fangirl for gossip columnists. You know, that's how it got started with Jane Benjamin. So it's always been something I love. And I feel like I'm fascinated by you because I never believed I could be a reporter, though I idealized it, because I knew about my personality that I have a great, big, thick, slovenly streak in myself. And I don't find myself, it's not like I'm naturally driven to go out knocking on doors and calling people and showing up and getting the answers. I just didn't ever have that. And so I think that's why I'm like, oh, I'll be an English teacher for 34 years, you know. And I didn't even think that I had it in me to write a book because that requires just sitting down and doing it, you know. So as time went by, the biggest effect of writing about Jane Benjamin and now in this book, Sandy Zimmer, in the setting of this newspaper, is that I've always been afraid of rejection, feeling like an outsider, and so I've been afraid to place those phone calls to people who might have the answers. And because I've been writing for Jane Benjamin, who's a very difficult girl and does not seem to have much fear of anything that she should have fear of, I've kind of been in this position of like, you know what, I'm just calling those people. I'm just going to keep calling them, which is what happened to you, I'm sorry to say. When Carla said about tonight, I don't think I'm your right person for this. And I said, I'll call you. I'll explain why you're the right person. So that's inspired by Jane Benjamin.
Oh, great. Well, it's funny because I was wondering how you kind of came up with your newspaper types. Because, and this is kind of a long-winded intro to this question, but they are somewhat accurate. However, I've been in the newspaper business since the 80s, and I think a lot of people modeled themselves on Hollywood's idea of journalists, and then sort of became that rat-a-tat-tat.
Yeah.
It is a type of person who does it.
Do you want to tell us about what happened with your movie review when you had COVID?
Oh,
Never.
Not on film.
Okay,
No,
never mind.
Yeah. Also, I don't want you to have those pictures on film either.
Okay.
That was, okay, so here's the thing this is what's different about my job at the university, is that things aren't really urgent. But when you do, I mean, they are urgent sometimes. Sometimes they really, really are. Sometimes they really are. But usually things are planned out. There is also like a cycle, the academic year cycle. And so you know when things are due. And so if you have COVID, say, they're not going to make you work. Yeah. But that's not how it works for newspapers. They have a hole to fill. And so we'll extrapolate. We can extrapolate from there. But I did want to ask you, though, so why the Chronicle? I'll tell you my story of the Chronicle is I was at the Bakersfield Californian, and I could see I was in the union, and they had a strike, and me being only like 25 years old, I thought that was very glamorous. It would be awful, you know. Yeah. But, and so there was that, and then I read Tales of the City, and that had started in the Chronicle.
Right.
And so these were the things that led me to the Chronicle and just being in love with it before I ever worked there. And it's still my favorite place I've ever worked. Yeah. So where did your thing come? Where did your fascination with it come from?
Actually, it's very explicit. When I first started writing Copy Boy, my protagonist was not Jane Benjamin. It was Herb Caen. So Herb Caen grew up here. He was, 17 years old when he, he'd been writing for the Union and so forth. He got himself to San Francisco. His sister was first chair in the San Francisco Symphony and played for the Blue Network Symphony. She had this totally great flat on California Street where she had the best parties where everybody famous came. And so Herb Caen, as a 17-year-old, drives to San Francisco, lives on his sister's couch for a year, and then he has a column at the Chronicle. So when I learned about this, I'm like, nobody has this. How does this even happen? And I became really obsessed with him. And so that's where I started digging into the Chronicle, and I thought, well, this is great. I can write a novel which is taking place in that year that we have no information about. Because I went to the San Francisco History Center. They have a whole, it's called the Herb Caen San Francisco History Room. Anyway, they have all these scrapbooks, and they have all this stuff about his growing up in Sacramento, and then all this stuff when he's a columnist, and zero for that year on that couch. And so I thought, well, I'm going to write a book that takes place in that year when we don't know what happened. And then, you know, I've told my friends this story before, that I went to, it used to be called the Squaw Valley Community of Writers, now it's a Community of Writers. And I went to a workshop there, the very first time I'd ever had my work workshopped. I'm sitting in a circle, and about half the people in my workshop group were young men from UC Irvine's MFA program. Very young men, really talented. So they, you know, talked about my chapter a little bit, and then one of them said, well, Herb Caen goes to this party, and he's greeted by this beautiful woman. Where's his erection? He would be aroused. And then all of the men in my workshop group, like, it is not believable that he would not be aroused at this party. You do not deal with his erection in this scene. So I went home and I go, well, now Herb Caen's going to be a girl. So it was not a great thing to do in your first book to have to figure that out.
Now, I wanted to go back to where you thought you never had a single book in you. How did the first one come about? It was fairly recently. Were you retired?
No, I was still teaching at Sac State, and gosh, I retired during the pandemic. They made these great, you know, offers to clear the decks, and so I accepted one of those offers. But when Copy Boy came out, I was still teaching.
Oh, okay.
And is that your question?
What'd you say?
Oh, but so I was balancing all of that. And then when I found out that it made more sense even financially to retire than to keep teaching, then it was automatic. I'll retire and then I'll write more. Yeah.
Great. And,
Yeah.
and do you have a regular writing schedule? They always ask this of writers.
I don't really, but what happens is when I feel it's time that I need to get a lot done, I'm like an emergency writer. You know, I block myself away, I just get her done. And sometimes my granny had a house in Morro Bay that has now come to us, and it's, you know, I love it so much, and partly it's because I can go there for 10 days, not get off that couch, and get so much done. Yeah.
Do you know, Shelley, what they call emergency writers? Journalists. So
maybe I would have made one after all.
now, I wondered how you, and I understand the Herb Caen part of it, but how did you kind of, would you call this genre, subgenre, historical mystery?
Yeah, the first 3 books were really, you know, sometimes you choose what they're called, what categories they go in, and sometimes, like for instance with Amazon, they change your mind. They change your categories, right? So I was thinking historical mystery, but then it started, with those first 3 books, it turned into historical thrillers, and now I'm getting historical. So this
Just
one,
historical?
yeah,
Okay.
because the first 3 books adopted a, you know, I worked on hitting those conventions that a mystery or a thriller require. And it was a fantastic way to learn, for me, about writing in fiction, because in mystery and thriller, there's a requirement that things change. People change. Things do not stand still. It was a great lesson in writing. And now, even though there's mystery involved in this book, it's not strictly a mystery anymore. Yeah.
Does writing historical things make it easier to avoid cell phones and things like that?
Yeah.
That would make it very easy to contact people and avoid misunderstandings and
Yeah.
that type of thing?
Yeah, I mean, how can you write a a contemporary thriller when, your reader's like, just give them a text, you know what I mean? Everything is so solvable, so it's funny, but the weird parts are that when you do historical, your readers are super dialed into the time period. So if you use, like if I say, okay, it's mission 95230, then you'll get an email from a reader. Well, mission at that point was not a prefix that existed for another year, And my friend Casey, who has written 11 novels, she had, during the Regency period, she had a protagonist eating chocolate and heard from a letter, because this was before really anybody emailed, they did not eat chocolate at that year. So it's like, so there's extra research by people who are really invested in that time period. Yeah.
And that's very helpful.
Yeah.
And now, okay, so what I like about, and we've talked about our shared Kern County history, is that is often a part of California that kind of gets lost, other than, Steinbeck.
Yeah.
But and why is that important to include that? And when you say things like, when she's called like a tomato picker, or pejoratively, like I worked in a potato shed. I worked in the, I did all sorts of. They were, of course, my summer jobs.
Yeah,
but my family came to Kern County to be ranchers. And so that's important to me, and I'd like to give a shout out to Magpie, because they don't act like the Central Valley doesn't exist. I mean, the San Joaquin Valley doesn't exist.
Yay!
So it's not all Sonoma.
That's right.
Yeah, and all
that
those
is right.
pretty places. I'm kidding.
Yeah, no.
But so tell me about that, because what I noticed from this book is it draws in everyone. So you've got like Pat Brown, you've got our own Earl Warren, Bakersfield Earl Warren. And why was that important for you to include that aspect?
I was on a panel this week with three historical fiction writers. And one of the things that came up, somebody said, and we all agreed, is that a lot of the people you meet who write historical fiction, they care about the context. And one of them said something I really agree with. It's like, you've got all these moving parts, and you're super interested in the collagen that binds them. And I'm really interested in those connections. And I do feel, I've joked with you about my chip on the shoulder, that like I don't like when I moved from Bakersfield to LA for college, and from LA we moved to San Francisco, and then we moved here. Everywhere I moved, people were snobby about the previous place I lived. Northern Californians make fun of Southern California, right? Everybody makes fun of Bakersfield, obviously, but in Sacramento, they make fun of Bakersfield, but we're in San Francisco, they make fun of Sacramento. And I always feel like there's a weird thing in California, like we have these little fiefdoms. And I feel like I've got a foot in so many of these places, and I have loved those places. And I feel defensive about them. And I also kind of feel that you're going to disagree with me about that. But I feel Sacramento is if you threw Bakersfield and San Francisco in a blender and you mixed it all up. We've got a lot of both here,
That's interesting. I don't agree.
Oh. I'm interested.
I don't think Sacramento is like Bakersfield. I
Okay.
don't. But I think it's interesting though that Bakersfield held on to all of its Dust Bowl kind of roots, country music roots, whereas I think they were eclipsed in the Sacramento area where that life still happened by all the military presence.
That's right.
And and that type of thing. So I don't get that sense from here of like old history and. But I mean, I live in Midtown, so who knows what it's like in like Antelope or something. I really have no idea. So you can kind of choose how do you decide when you're going to have real people? Because they're all dead and you can write about them,
Yeah.
right? But like, how do you decide whether you're going to have real people or made-up characters?
So, and so in historical fiction, there's like some kind of continuum, right? And I have some friends who write historical fiction who they'll characterize themselves as biographical historical fiction. So they feel they need to hug the facts really, really tightly. And I love their work. They do great jobs. But also, I don't like that thing you get when you watch a movie or read a book and it's a biopic and it's all baggy because there's so many scenes. Like, do we need to know? I know it really happened to him, but do we need it in this story? So that was one thing that affected me. And the other is that I'm a very good girl. I don't like to hurt anybody's feelings. So the first time I made an active choice to fictionalize characters was in my first book when I was going to use Dorothea Lange, and I learned that in order to do her brilliant photographic work, which I've adored my entire life because she gave dignity to my people, when I learned that in order for her to do that work, she had to put her children, 5 of them, in foster care. And so I'm like, okay, that's a thing. This is something I'm chewing on now, and that's what kind of got me started on the theme of ambitious women in history. Like, what do they have to do to achieve their ambitions? And I didn't want to. She was dead, but her children were not. And what I have read is her children did not love being in foster care. And so that was my first decision. I find her brilliant and fascinating and some parts troubling, as all people are. Mm-hmm. And I didn't want to do it to that person, and I wanted then to make her more dastardly than she was.
Oh, I understand that because I'm a critic and I like to judge. And so I did not know that about her, and now it has changed how I think about her. How I think about Alice Munro has forever been changed.
Yeah, it is really.
And yeah, that's interesting. You're very kind in that way, and thinking about that her children were still alive. Now, I find your books very cinematic, and I told you this because I worked at the Chronicle, and there's a scene where the protagonist is leaving the Chronicle to try to get through all of this. It's called VJ Day, right?
Right.
VJ Day, bedlam. And you're like, oh, I'm going to take 9th. That's the easiest way. And I was like, is that the easiest way? I think it's 6th.
She told me that, and I lost sleep for 3 nights.
No, but anyway. So but that's just the start, and it's that way the whole thing. When I'm thinking about like when she has to go to, I'm not giving anything away.
Yeah.
When she has to go to City Hall and try to find a way in and all of that. There were still barriers to communication. Yeah. Even, there were a lot of barriers to communication given the timing, being out, at that time and on that day. So that was handled really well. But what I was saying, it's almost like the pacing of it is almost like a movie length or like maybe 2 episodes of a show. Do you think that way?
It's like when I'm writing, I don't know that I think that way, but I can't help being influenced, as all of us are, by the movies we've seen and the TV shows that we've loved. So I know that's like in my personal zeitgeist, it gets in my head, so it has to influence it. Plus, I think it's really interesting about me because all my friends know that if you had to tell the truth, I'm a very physically sedentary person. And yet, I love action in a story. I love things to move. I have never had as much fun as when I had to write a fight scene because it was so interesting to investigate, I've never had a fight. How do you fight? How do you swing those punches? Where does it hit? What's the hit that makes the difference? So in terms of the pacing, it's because I've always thought I was like an intuitive, like emotional person. No, apparently not. I like things to go.
Me too. I just reviewed a movie that's not great, but it's just like boom, 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 car chase, car chase, car chase. I'm like, yeah, that's for me. Okay, so I did want to ask about why the switch in this book to this protagonist, and are you done with Jane Benjamin?
You know, you notice that Jane Benjamin plays a role here.
She's definitely in it. She
Yeah.
definitely plays a role. Yeah.
But I want to tell you, if you've read any of my earlier books, Jane Benjamin is a very specific person. She's a very difficult girl. And I've been in her head for 3 books, and I kind of thought I'd take a vacation and get out of her head. Like, I don't know if they're here, the Skylark Foxes. One thing that they mentioned was she's so badly behaved. I wish you would have her behave better, you know, and I couldn't make her behave better because that's not who she was. And I wanted to get in the head of somebody different. And I kind of made Sandy, you know, she's coming off of the death of her husband, and she inherits this newspaper, and she's hesitant in a way that Jane is never hesitant. Jane needs to be pulled back. She needs to edit her instincts, whereas Sandy needs to be encouraged, often by Jane, to go for it. So I just wanted to explore that a little bit. And another thing about it is, if there may be 2 more Sandy books, but if there are, Sandy's going to age. Jane aged a little bit. I think Sandy will jump like 12 years at a time, because one of the things I first wanted to do when I was writing Copy Boy was super interested in these kind of, I think of them as crones, and I know that sounds like a bad word, but to me it's not, like super badass, cool old women. And I always wonder, how did they get to be who they are if they were raised historically? You know, how did, you know, Ruth Bader Ginsburg or Sandra Day O'Connor get to where they are? So I was interested in that trajectory, and I realized with Jane, I collapsed everything into her relative youth. So I'd kind of like with Sandy to let her get older and see how this changes and how she masters certain skills and maybe gets a little more cranky and intolerant. I don't know. Not naming names.
It's interesting because I've seen in like various roles in people do get it, people like Jane, women like Jane, do often get ahead in something like the newspaper business. But when I've dealt with more like, you know, lawyer and judicial ranks, it's the most gracious people that get ahead.
We got a judge in the front row. You can agree with that,
yeah. Like these extraordinary people, and they're the most gracious.
That's right.
Least egomaniacal that you'll meet.
That is right.
At least when I'm interviewing them or when they're coming to the law school, and I'm sort of surprised by it.
Well, I think that part of the draw for Sandy for me is that Jane wants to write. Sandy wants to put out a newspaper and manage it. So it was super fun for me to consider what kind of personality characteristics would be able to handle the business of getting the news on the paper.
Now, you claim to be sedentary, but from what I understand, you were pounding the pavement of San Francisco to research this book. Can you tell me about that?
It was a lovely gift at this point in my life. If there's something you want to do, I say do it. You know, I got these brilliant, wonderful children of mine raised. Andy and I are so thrilled with how they turned out, and because they're decent people. Here's the part where I cry on cue. But really, a funny thing happened after they were out the door. I realized, like, well, what if I'm the protagonist? What if I'm somebody who has an arc of my own, and what will it be? And so I now have discovered I can't not write at this point because it's so much fun. And a huge portion of that is the research, is the taking architecture tours in San Francisco and, you know, riding along with this guy who's showing me all of his favorite buildings, and that it's a great joy. It is a great joy that I discovered late in life. So thrilled I found it.
So I think we're going to get to questions, audience questions, but I wanted to ask you this question that every interviewer has to ask. What would you like the audience to take away from this book, Shelley?
Gosh, I struggled with that, but I guess a little bit of 2 things. One is that we're living in a time when newspapers are in a precarious position. And sometimes it's not their fault, and sometimes it is their fault. They're making choices. Newspapers are making choices. And so one thing I would like you to be able to take from this book is that it is extremely important for news organizations to value facts and to see part of their job as revealing relevant facts in order to keep the powerful, hold them to account. That's a big thing I want you to feel and be reminded of. But also, I would like to add to that it's complicated. Sandy is worried about paying the checks of all of her employees. She needs to worry about keeping the paper going. So it's almost always more complicated than it seems. So I guess this is my cheer for a willingness to see the complexity while valuing the truth. Yeah.
Great. Would you like to, do you want to open it up to questions?
Yeah, let's do. Does anybody have a question? Yeah, go ahead, Pauline.
Did you think at all about Catherine Graham?
Yeah, that was one of the earliest moments in this research. Oh, yeah, she asked if I thought at all about Catherine Graham, the publisher of the Washington Post. And absolutely. While I was doing this research into the Peace Riot, I was also happened to be reading Personal History, Catherine Graham's memoir. Highly recommend it. So readable, fascinating, what a figure. So, and like, how these things in the zeitgeist just kind of pile up on you and you start like pulling them together. One of them is, there's a book called The Only Woman in the Room, and it's a series of photographs of women who are like the first ones to get in that room. There's a photograph of Catherine Graham, who was the publisher of the Washington Post. She inherited the Washington Post when her husband committed suicide. When her father, who had been the publisher of the Post, died, they left it to her husband. And then he committed suicide, and then she inherited that role of a publisher. And I saw this photograph in The Only Woman in the Room, and it shows this boardroom, and it's all men in brown or gray suits, and one woman, Catherine Graham, in a bright blue suit. And that picture might have sold this book to me, because I want to look at the kind of woman who might be the only woman in the room. And I had thought, Sandy was in 2 earlier books, I thought she had things in common with Catherine Graham. She's kind of a giver and a helper, didn't envision herself as like a stalwart leader. Yeah. Great question.
I did want to follow up really quickly about the other person, Sissy, and that's a real person from is it the Medill family?
From the Medill family.
Okay, yeah, who's a character in
Yeah,
that book.
she's got a great memoir out too, or I don't think it's a memoir, it's a biography. But so she was a big publisher. There were only 3 women publishers at that time. We talked a little bit about this, but Sissy was like things that Sandy was not. Oh my gosh. Sissy was rough, she was ruthless, she was sensational, and she did very well. Her paper did very, very well. And so she's in there because Sandy can't be Sissy. She's not constitutionally able to be like Sissy. But she is able to take in some of Sissy's advice and ask herself, what part of that can I use?
Is there a certain freedom to her to be able to make these kind of risky decisions because the paper's on the ropes already?
You mean Sandy?
Sandy,
yeah,
sorry,
yeah,
I mean Sandy.
Yes, yeah.
Or is that just her natural, that's just what's coming out once?
No, I do think everything is about to fall apart. So she does have more impetus to go, what if? What if I tried this?
Yeah. Sorry, I have some more. More questions?
Any other questions from out there? Please, please. Yes. Yeah, Michael.
Shelley, how do you think you progress as a writer from your first book?
I won't use the word progress, but I've changed. And I feel like the question was, how have I progressed as a writer? and from the first book to now. And I will say that everything has changed with each book. And what I feel is, what is it? My first book was published in 2020, but I wrote it for about 9 years before that. So I feel like what I've done here is given myself permission to be a learner. I have learned a lot, and I am not embarrassed or dismissive of my earlier work. I learned things in that earlier work, and I keep saying, now I'm going to try this. And I used the Jane Benjamin novels to work a lot on pacing and plot and movement. And in this book, there was an awful lot of history involved, and it was a different kind of labor. And I don't know what the next book will be. So I think what I would say is I keep adding to my skill set. I keep learning new things that I want to try. And I've been a pantser and a plotter. In the writing industry, there are pantsers and plotters. Pantsers are people who just start writing. They don't know what the hell's going to happen. They just start writing, all very organic. And then there are plotters who make everything out in advance so they know where the thing's going. I'm sort of in between because I plot it, and then I'm willing to throw it away when it doesn't work. But I've tried different versions of that. What does it mean to plan everything? What does it mean to just do this organically with candles lit? I no longer like candles, you all. Yeah.
Do your characters during the process ever surprise you? And not just where you're throwing something out, but just where you're like, oh, wow, this is something that I can go in another direction that I hadn't foreseen before during the process.
They do. You make a plot, and then they shock you. This came up the other day with a reader that I love who was very, very unhappy in my book, Tomboy, that Jane Benjamin sleeps with someone she should not sleep with. Unconditionally, it was a bad decision. And then after she sleeps with him, he goes to the bathroom, she goes to his dresser, she finds his wallet, and she takes $4 out of it and leaves. I did not put that in the plan. I did not agree with that behavior. And as I wrote it, I go, what are you doing? And so at that point, Jane became more like a daughter to me than a character I was in control of because, all right, I didn't know she was going to do that. I didn't know she had that in her. So, yeah.
Are there any, yes?
Maybe an observation and a question. Did you ever imagine 10 years ago when you were working on Copy Boy that you would be sitting there with your fourth book today and responding to what the gentleman asked about progress over the years? They're all wonderful, but when I read this latest, I could not put it down. So if anything, it gets tighter and tighter and better with each book. Not that the first ones weren't good, they were. But this one, man, I couldn't put it down. I think I read it in 2 sittings.
Oh, good. I'm so glad to hear that. And your check is in the mail. But I do feel like it's learning about plot, learning about pacing, and then now slowing down to say, what about the other stuff? Feathering in the other stuff that means a lot to me. And did I know this would happen? No. I did know it felt really good to have a notebook. It felt really good to devote a certain amount of time each day to writing in it and to talk to other writers. That's what got me started. But I will say about stuff like this, which I could not be happier that you are all here. And one of the reasons why is for 34 years I taught writing. I taught academic writing. I taught essays. And many of my students were first generation in college, all that kind of stuff. When I retired, it gave me the gift of being able to do this, but I always missed talking to people about writing. And so I did not know that writing books would give me the chance to talk to people about writing, which is just, it is amazing. I'll take, on my deathbed, I'll go, think of this time I have spent talking about ideas and how you get them on paper. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I realized at one point I was many, many years into my journalism career, and I realized I'd never spoken to anyone else at the newspaper about the writing process, and I'm like, do you put it all down and then go revise it, or do you just like, this paragraph is perfect, and I'm moving on from there? I had that conversation about age 45, and I realized like no one ever talked about it. It was so weird. It was like, is it because we're so busy? Is it like a secret thing, or it was
Or maybe because in reporting there's such a level of competition that maybe, I don't know, you could say that more than I, if there's an unwillingness to share how it's done.
To share, I know.
Okay.
I mean, everybody had to crank out so much stuff. It was just like, and also, there just wasn't a lot of reading each other's work either, because we were kind of too busy and self-involved, frankly.
Well, that's not like writers of fiction at all. Not too self-involved. No.
So, have you found? How long have you lived in Sacramento?
Since 1990, January of 1990.
Wow. Okay. And so, have you found a great community here of writers, or do you have to go out?
I look around this room. I do. I think it's a wonderful community of writers. We're kind of well known, obviously, for poets. You know, that's getting a lot of attention. But fiction writing here is amazing, and the people are amazing, and the supportive vibe of it has been tremendous for me. I love it. I do love it.
Well, I want to tell you that your reputation is wonderful, because I called my good friend Nikki Cardoza, and because I was like, I don't really know her, and I'm doing this thing. We're both from Bakersfield. I like her writing, and she said, "Oh, she's fantastic." And so,
Thank you. Yeah.
And you are.
When you're really old, you know a lot of people.
Is there anything that you want to? Is there anything else anyone wants to ask? Oh, sorry. Yes.
As a former teacher, how do you feel about AI?
How do I feel about AI? Actually, I just had my publisher had an all hands kind of meeting online today, and it was just like a sobbing about AI and what are we going to do. I think that everybody doesn't know what they're going to do, and everybody is taking a righteous path toward assessing it. And from what I'm hearing about people who are running publishing companies, they're very worried about it. And also, I hear this all the time. That horse is out of the barn. It is out of the barn. So I'm not trying to be a downer to you at all about that. I'm just saying I keep hearing that. And so the question is, how can we use the new technology to further our real writing craft that is human-centered? And there may be ways, but nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. Great question. Thank you.
It's interesting is when you're really focused on the truth, that the way that AI is working, though, because I'll look things up just for the law school, and I'll find my own words come back at me in the wrong order. And it's rough. And so, like, whatever I wrote as, and I'm trying to double check the history, that what I wrote during the years that I've been there has just become the history that's on Google now, and it's accurate.
Yeah.
But it's like I, haven't worked there for the whole time, and so there's some scary parts.
They're scary, and then also, my devious mind is like, well, that's efficient. It's my history, but yeah, it is complicated. All three of my Jane Benjamin books were used for training Anthropic. So I am part of that class action but I don't think we're going to be able to stop it. I think publishing companies in particular need to do a really good job of saying, you need to strike a deal with our company so that our authors get to opt in or opt out, and they get to be paid for the use of their work, just as electricity companies are paid for the use of their electricity, right? So you don't know anyone who works more for less than writers, and they deserve a little something. Yeah.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It also seems like a very bad time to have everyone be dumber, and there being no newspapers covering local things. News just doesn't get covered. It's very scary times. What this internet thing hath wrought.
And I also think you're in a position maybe to know about this, but I keep hearing like we're in our town, there's this new thing with a partnership with public radio, starting a public interest newspaper, which is super interesting. And then I'm going to be at an event in San Francisco at the Ferry Building, and the person who's interviewing me worked at the Chronicle, and she has run the podcast for the Chronicle, but now she's doing a public interest news organization in the city. So it's just kind of interesting to imagine.
I'm sorry, what was the first part? Was it about the Bee or the Chronicle?
No, the first part was about in Sacramento.
That they're doing that new website?
Yes.
It's called?
Abridged.
Abridged.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then in the city, I don't remember what it's called.
Oh, okay.
I'll meet her soon.
Oh,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
When is that event?
September 14th.
Oh, great,
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. Pardon?
September 16th.
Oh, thank you. Oh.
How does it feel? Is this the actual day of the release? Of
Yes.
the book's release? What's that day like for you?
I have been stressed out for quite a while, and I don't know if you know, I have literally 3 cold sores that I have been nursing for weeks. I'm like tending them like my own gerbils or something. But I have been worried about every part of launching this book because I feel like I know this is a terrible metaphor, but in a way it's like a child, and you want to usher them into the world properly. You don't want to do it badly and not give them a chance. But I woke up this morning, I felt good. I felt really good. I'm like, okay, I did all this prep. It's done. It's, baby's out. And I know you got to figure out how to nurse it too, but I'm not looking at that right now.
Well, thank you and congratulations.
Oh, thank you.
And here's to Shelley.
Thanks so much. And can I have some applause for Carla for letting herself her arm be twisted?
It wasn't good.
Yeah. So there is more to drink and more food, and we have the space. We still have the space, so you don't have to rush out. And I'd be happy to sign books if you like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great, thank
You're awesome.
you,
It was really
Carla.
fun.
Oh,
Really fun.
great. Please turn off our sound.
This is where I'm going to say I killed